Welcome to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze, bringing you all the entertainment news and movie reviews a Jew and ally can use. I'm your host, Deputy Editor Amanda Borschel-Dan, here with the one and only movie maven, Jordan Hoffman, straight from New Jersey.
Hello. How is everyone today?
Everyone, including me, and I speak only for myself, I have to say, is doing just fine.
That's good. That's great to know. It's early here where I am, and I got very little sleep for reasons I'll get to in a moment. But Amanda, you said that you had a little bit of a breaking news jangle you wanted to discuss before we got into this week's film.
It is true. And it is not Hollywood news per se, but it is definitely in the realm of entertainment. And I want to ask you, Jordan Hoffman, who do you know is a man with convictions?
With convictions, someone who feels strongly about things and then goes out into the world and tries to actualize them.
I should actually ask the question differently. Who is a boy with convictions? And it's okay. I'm kind of muddying the waters now. I'm just going to give it to you.
I don't know. Who is a young man? A boy, yes.
Well, it's actually not so much a boy as a man, but he calls himself Boy George. And Boy George just came out with a new song in support of Israel.
Oh my God, really?
The idea, yes,
oh boy,
really.
He's doomed.
You know what? That's why I say, why does he call himself a man with convictions? Because he really lays it all out on the line. And he says, basically, that the October 7th massacre was the genocide. Hamas perpetrated the genocide, and war isn't pretty, but Israel definitely was.
He's taken sides. He's taken sides in this conflict, and he lives in Britain. I'm assuming he lives in Britain still. I don't think he lives in the USA. They're pretty hardcore.
I think
about
so.
These things.
Yeah.
He's not Jewish, is he?
Not that I'm aware of.
Is like his partner Jewish? Does he have a Jewish husband or something, or a Jewish? Manager, maybe. I don't know. Not to perpetuate stereotypes, but I don't know. Maybe. Well, I did not know that. And Boy George is not someone I think about all that much, but I tumble for you. And what was his other baby?
Karma Chameleon.
Chameleon. I mean, that is remarkable that he would do such a thing. He is.
Yeah, and it's great lyrics to a reggae beat. And so if you want to get a little boost of Zionism through Boy George,
toe tapping Zionism. What is the name of his new song? I'm going to listen to it.
I think it's called We Will Dance Again. And that, of course, harkens to the Nova massacre site where over 300 were killed, mown down, really. I've spoken with survivors there, and they just describe hearing pop, pop, pop as, the bullets were flying, and they had no idea what was going on at first, for sure. So check it out. Boy George, We Will Dance Again.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. Well, it's funny because my little news story, and part of the reason why I didn't get much sleep because I got home at very, very late, and then I was all frazzled up, is I saw the improvisational rock group Phish last night at Madison Square Garden. Me and 22,000 of my closest friends. They've been around for 30 some odd years. Two of the members of the group are Jewish, the bass player, Michael Gordon, and the drummer, John Fishman. And they have a song in their repertoire, which according to the stats, Phish fans keep a lot of stats. I'm looking at it. They only have played it at 4.02% of their concerts over the last 30, 40 years or whatever it is. And last night was one of those times. So I'm going to play it a little bit for you now, because it's interesting to think of in the middle of a rock concert at Madison Square Garden with 20,000 people, this suddenly out of nowhere, and everybody starts dancing, and I think you'll recognize it.
Nice.
So you don't have to be Jewish to be a Phish fan. But every now and then, for reasons that no one really knows, they will start singing Avenu Malkeinu, and 20,000 hippies dancing and some of them will know what it is, and some of them will just think, hey, they're talking some crazy language. And that was something that I got to experience last night. Oveno Malcano, I don't think is particularly a pointed thing having to do with politics or anything like that. They've been doing it for 30 years, but it was funny to hear that last night. And I thought it was particularly amusing knowing that I was coming in to talk about the Reel Schmooze the next day that I got to hear it. So that's the story there.
Jordan, Avina Makeno, Our Father, Our King. Do you know who has the best rendition of that?
Well, I don't know about the best, but I know that Barbra Streisand has done it as well. Is that
Barbara? It's like butter. I have to just say, it's like butter.
This last night they do it with a blazing guitar solo and all kinds of complex drum rhythms and a rock beat and whatnot. So that was kind of funny. So the band Phish.
Can you imagine the mashup possibilities between Barbara and Phish?
I think that's the only connection. I wonder if, because Phish does like to do unexpected songs. I don't think they've ever done Evergreen or The Way We Were or anything like that. But certainly nothing from Yentl. But maybe someday. Who knows?
Maybe someday. If you will it. It is no dream.
Exactly.
That is so cool. And, I've never been to Madison Square Garden, but there is some possibility that I'll come to New York in November. So I should check the listings for the second half of November and see what's playing, because there is this chance that I'll be there. And you and I can finish my education on good Ashkenazi New York
That's
food.
right. You can bring some cottage cheese with you. Well, Madison Square Garden is actually nothing spectacular. It's just a giant hockey arena. There's nothing going on there. It's a hockey arena where everything is overpriced. You want a Diet Pepsi, it's like $11. It's ridiculous. But the thing about
that's a diet. It makes you want to go on a diet. Don't get the Pepsi. There's your diet.
It does have very good sound system, though. I mean, I will say they put a lot of money into the sound system. I mean, mainly it's where the Knicks and the Rangers and other sports events happens. But the one thing they do have is they are a little bit of a museum to themselves. So as you're going, during intermission, if you go to the restroom, and they do have stuff framed on the wall, and they have a lot of things like, sports memorabilia, which doesn't mean much to me, but then they'll have like, I don't know. It's like, here's Bob Dylan's sock, it's like, wow, look at that. There's George Harrison. I think I saw George Harrison's shirt yesterday. I'm like, well, that's kind of impressive that they have that there. So I guess they do have a lot of history.
Now, if it were the Chili Peppers sock, if you know what I mean, wink, wink, that could have been something
Go back
see.
to listen to one of our, that's an extra large sock, by the way, too. Go back and listen to our older episode about the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But Amanda, what movie are we going to talk about today on the Reel Schmooze?
Today, my friend, we have the movie Double Indemnity by the great Billy Wilder. And we had asked our listening audience to come up with several suggestions. Double Indemnity definitely was mentioned. Another movie called The Apartment was mentioned. I might have mistakenly rented it and not quite had the chance to see it yet.
When does that expire? Is that a 24-hour? Does it a week? Or?
No, I think it's a month. Something like that.
Well, maybe we'll still work that in.
Exactly. But let's go to a break, and then we're going to chew over Double Indemnity. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman, and we are here to discuss Billy Wilder's Double Indemnity. But I think, Jordan, before we get into the film, we should really talk about the filmmaker. And it's the main reason why we're talking about this film.
I don't know what it was, but I was reading something, and it sort of reminded me about Billy Wilder and his career and his impact on American culture, modern culture. Some of his movies, I think, still reverberate, Double Indemnity being one of them. And he really is a foundational part of classic Hollywood. And when I just very quickly just go through some of the films he's made, and he had a really remarkable life. Just to give you the background, he was born in a small village in Austria-Hungary. And when he was a young man, he moved to Vienna, and he was a deadline journalist, and he also was, as he refers to in a story which has now finally been translated into English and you can read it, he was what was known as a taxi dancer at hotels. He was broke, and then he was a young dashing man, and he would go to hotels, and if older women wanted to dance with a young man, they would pay him a few dollars. And that does make it seem like, oh, is that a euphemism for something? And no, and no, it wasn't. He actually would. You would just hire somebody to dance for a few minutes. But then also it is implied that he did do more with these women if they were paying. So it's an interesting time in history. And
you are blowing my
Yeah.
mind because all the pictures I've seen of him, he looks like, I don't know, almost like Ben Gurion's cousin.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, he
So
lived a long
it's really
he lived a
hard.
long life, and he was a presence in Hollywood, which I'm going to get to in a moment, well into the 1990s. But when he was a young man, he in Vienna, he was dashing, and then he moved to Berlin, and he worked for the newspaper, which was known. The English translation was known as Tempo, and it was kind of known as the Jewish newspaper, even though the owners were not Jewish and the editors were. It was just sort of affiliated with the Jewish lifestyle, and so much so that there's people who wrote for it were shot by proto Nazis and whatnot. It's a terrible story, but anyhow, he was a journalist, and then he became a screenwriter working for UFA, which was the German film agency. Very, very famous. They were sort of so many of the great Hollywood legends came from there, because when things started to get really rough in Germany, a lot of them left, and many of them were Jewish. And Wilder at the time, he had just started directing his own screenplays, and he left and came to the USA. And it's very sad. He was unable to convince his family to leave as well. And this is something that haunted him his entire life. And most of his family were killed in concentration camps. And in fact, when he was making, like literally during the time that he was in production on Double Indemnity, he knew that his family had been taken to camps, but he didn't know. He was trying to get word of what was going on while he's making this very dark and sinister film. So it's just amazing to think about that. So, in fact, he has.
Let me just mention as well that his name was actually Samuel when he was born, but his mother apparently named him Billy after Billy the Kid, like the Wild West. So
they had it.
that
He
was
had
quite
it.
funny.
Was born with like a love of American culture, and so he went to the USA and kind of redefined American culture. I think what you'll find in his films. He has kind of he's an interesting character because he has like two lanes of movies. He's made very dark films with a lot of defensive irony, which I think Double Indemnity fits in with that. But he's also made a lot of very zany comedies. So he kind of has two levels. Now, you mentioned The Apartment is another one. The Apartment isn't that zany. It's more like a friendly romantic comedy. But there is some darkness to it too, should you ever watch it. We'll get to that in a moment. I mean,
Intentionally.
a part of it, it's actually starts with a suicide attempt is what gets the movie rolling. So there is some darkness to it. So he brought to the U.S., as well as did many of his compatriots, sort of a Welsh schmerz to Hollywood filmmaking and storytelling. And I mentioned before, talking about his family, he has a very famous quote, which is mentioned a lot. He talked about the difference between optimism and pessimism. And the quote is, he says, "The optimists died in the gas chambers and the pessimists have pools in Beverly Hills," which means he was enough of a pessimist to say, we got to get the hell out of Europe. And he survived, but that's at what cost? So, and that's sort of typical of the dark irony that you'll find in a lot of his movies. And
now, for me, going into this, the only film that I for sure saw was Some Like It Hot,
right,
which is kind of more the
yeah,
zany
that's
comedy,
a classic.
but also has some deeper messaging.
Has some deeper
I
messages
would
and
say.
also incredible clever writing. I mean, it has some of the what he's really well known for is screenplays that are really, really tight, and they with the comedies can have all kinds of chaos to it, but it all ties up in the end and then ends with a perfect note. Some Like It Hot, of course, is Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis. They witness a
Marilyn Monroe.
they witness a gangland murder. So they have to go undercover and they dress as women and join an all women's jazz band. And Marilyn Monroe is in there. And of course, they fall in love with her and blah, blah, blah. So the films he's made, and these are just some of the biggies. Double Indemnity, 1944. That was not his first film, but that was sort of his first absolute masterpiece. The Lost.
Was that his first Academy Award of 7?
Probably,
right?
yeah. I mean, he had made some films before Double Indemnity, but that was the first one that is sort of like an established classic. And then soon thereafter, the next year, he did The Lost Weekend, which was a very from 1945, a very frank look at alcoholism. Then in 1950, he did Sunset Boulevard, which is very similar to Double Indemnity, in that it's sort of a what we would now call a film noir, which is something I want to get to in a moment. And the next year, 1951, he made Ace in the Hole with Kirk Douglas. It's a very dark look and comical look at manipulative news media. A few years later, Witness for the Prosecution, 1959, he did Some Like It Hot, 1960, The Apartment, for which he won the Academy Award. And then right afterwards, 1961, 1-2-3, which is a speed of sound screwball comedy set in East Berlin as the Berlin Wall was being built. Very topical. There's a lot of Adlai Stevenson jokes in that movie, so some of it's a little dated, but it's really, really, really funny. And then in 1966, he made a movie called The Fortune Cookie, which was the first movie to put Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau together, which they then later made 10 movies together, some of which with Wilder and some of which not, like The Odd Couple, for example, which he did not have anything to do with, but it starred Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. And then he continued to make films until the early 80s, and he was not, he kind of was from another time. His later films do feel a little dated. Now you can look back at them and they say, oh, well, they're not dated. They're classic. You know, they're stately. But his films in the 70s and 80s didn't really connect with audiences. But because he was such a legend, he was just sort of like an elder statesman in Hollywood. And a lot of the film directors of the time, they really revered him. And in fact, there is a very famous book called Conversations with Wilder, which the director Cameron Crowe put out. It's kind of like it's like a thick coffee table book. It's not like a typical book because there's a lot of pictures and whatnot of it from the films, where he just said, look, I'm a young film director, Cameron Crowe, and I have access to Billy Wilder. I am going to just interview him for days and get it all down on paper, and a lot of these really great stories and just sort of his attitudes. And that's a kind of a legendary film book. But he also befriended a young fellow by the name of Steven Spielberg. And there is kind of a sad story from the early 1990s. So the story goes that in the 80s, when Spielberg was just becoming, huge, and he was making the film E.T. with MGM, MGM they were like, oh, let's give Billy Wilder a job. Let's let him hang around. They gave him a few bucks. They gave him an office, and he could just hang around the studio. And because everybody wants to have Billy Wilder around, even though they wouldn't let him make a movie. After 1981, he never made a film, but he could hang out in the lunchroom basically and talk to people. Who doesn't want that in there?
Schmooze,
they would
schmooze, as they say.
So he and Steven Spielberg became pretty good friends, and Spielberg would send Billy Wilder his script sometimes, and Billy Wilder would give notes or whatever. So anyway, the point is this: one day later, this is some years later, and Spielberg was not working at MGM. He gets a phone call at his office. Mr. Spielberg, he always called people Mr. or Mrs. or Miss. Mr. Spielberg, it's Mr. Wilder. I must speak to you. I must come to your office immediately. And Spielberg's like, oh my God, the great Billy Wilder wants to talk to me. Okay, sure. And he said, I can come to your house later tonight. We can have coffee. He goes, no, I must see you immediately. So Billy Wilder shows up with it's kind of like a vision from the past. He was wearing a suit, a hat, and a tie and whatnot. And he comes and he says, look, I just read a book called Schindler's Ark, which is what Schindler's List was called before it was Schindler's Ark. And he, with tears in his eyes, he's like, this is the story of my family. I haven't made a movie now in a decade. The studios won't let me, but I just found out that your company owns the rights to this book. And he goes, I'm on my hands and knees. I'm begging you, let me make this film. You can produce it. I can direct it. I have to tell this story. And Steven Spielberg looks at him and he goes, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm leaving for Poland in like a week. We've already cast the film. I'm making the film. We're ready to go. And Billy Wilder didn't know what to do, and he just kind of burst into tears. And the two of them just sat there. And according to legend, Spielberg just took his hand, and they just looked at each other. And that was the image he had when he went to Poland to make Schindler's List, was like, I have to make this for all the other reasons I have to make it, but I also have to make it for Billy Wilder. So that is kind of the story from the early 1990s about him. But, going back to 1944, Double Indemnity, which is when it came out, if you were to go to Google and type, and I did this. This is from my own history. If you were to go to Google and type in the expression film noir, which is a phrase that people hear and you might just think, what is that? Is that a crime movie? What is a film noir? And I'll get to the definition in a moment. But if you just Google the phrase and hit return, Google spits out some information and includes a picture. And the picture they include is a still from the movie Double Indemnity. Hence, it is, according to Google, the great brain of the 21st century, it is sort of the epitome, the classic. It was not the first, but I think it is the fundamental, the foundation of film noir. So what the hell is film noir? Well, nobody ever set out to make movies called films noir, if you want to be French about it. And in fact, it was the French. Noir, of course, means black in French. So black film, dark film. It was a French critic after the war that came up with this phrase. What happened was during the Second World War, Hollywood movies were verboten in France, in occupied France, and they did not get any new Hollywood movies. And after the war, a lot of stuff that had been around for a few years started coming into France. And a French critic, whose name I can't remember, started noticing some commonalities with a lot of them. He said, a lot of these movies kind of have similar themes and similar, what we call in film school, formalist elements, the lighting, the way the stories are told. So he decided to call these all film noir. And a lot of them have, it's like a checklist of what these movies can have. And Double Indemnity checks every single box. Number one is, it's a crime story. And it's about people who are lured by the seductive nature of crime. It has what is known as chiaroscuro lighting, meaning very, what's it called? High contrast, black and white, famously through, and there are some shots in this movie where, the light is coming through, what is it called? Blinds in a, what is that called? Blinds. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, blinds.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Where the light is coming through. So it's sort of like, makes like a zebra effect on your face, very dramatic.
Or prison stripes.
Thank you. Prison
say?
stripes. Very good. Also, voiceover. Double Indemnity begins with a guy. He hobbles up to his office. The elevator operator wants to schmooze with him, and he's like, I can't talk tonight, because we find out later he's been wounded. And he picks up a dictaphone, which is an old school,
old school podcast.
Yeah, old school podcast, exactly. He even puts the little, it wasn't even a tape, it was a cylinder. Did you see? He puts the wax cylinder in his dictaphone, and he goes, all right.
I have been talking about this aspect of the film to everybody.
So cool.
I just am so fascinated by this technology. 1944, amazing.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, so yes, so part of the film noir, the checklist is voiceover and very sort of like, the dialogue being very sort of hammy in a way, like some of the lines he speaks in this film. He's like, I killed a man. I did it for money, and I did it for a dame, and I didn't get the money. And
anytime you use the word dame, you just know you're in a film.
Exactly. I did it. I killed him for money and a woman. I didn't get the money, and I didn't get the woman. And then some of the other sort of checklist things in there are, I think I mentioned it pretty much. So yeah, the voiceover, the sort of dark look at crime, and just sort of the lighting and the camera angles, and they're all there. So Double Indemnity is sort of it's sort of the ne plus ultra of film noir, and this is a style of filmmaking that is still being done today. I mean, there's still pulling from Double Indemnity. There are films you'll watch, and I mean, sometimes it's very direct influence, like the costuming, the sunglasses, or the wig, Barbara Stanwyck's wig, or it'll just be sort of vibe.
Was it a wig?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so Jordan, you think it was, because my husband and I discussed this. We were like, how did she get her hair like that, and how does it stay like that forever?
Well,
we were really confused.
Well, this is part of when we'll get into, other than the fact that that Billy Wilder is Jewish, what makes this a Jewish film? And I have some theories on that. But before I get to that, we should mention a little bit about the plot, right? So our main character, Fred McMurray, he's a working guy. He's a kind of he's a likable guy, but he's not exactly he's just kind of a guy, he's a likable guy. and he sells insurance, which I guess means how likable can he be if he sells insurance? But he's an insurance salesman, and he's running around. He's got to get his renewed claims, and he's I got to go to this guy and get his renewed claim. He never picks up the phone and is going to go to his house. And he knocks on the door, and he's not there, but his wife is there, and his wife wearing a gorgeous anklet. He can't get his eyes off of her exposed leg. And she, of course, is played by Barbara Stanwyck. And she is a bored housefrau who immediately likes to flirt with him, and he likes to flirt with her. And they have a very, very famous exchange, which is a great example of like the Billy Wilder pattern that he and his co-screenwriters, he always had co-screenwriters, have in all of his films. It's the scene where they suddenly pretend that she goes like, oh, you're kind of speeding there, and he goes, how fast was I going, officer? And they kind of go back and forth. It's like, suppose I come down and give you a ticket, suppose I don't accept it, suppose I slap you on the wrist. It's very playful. And then he comes back, and then depending on your point of view, either she suggests to him a crime concept or he implants it to her. It's a little bit vague at first about whose idea it is, but this leads to the other thing that I was going to mention in sort of what makes a classic film noir, which is the concept of the femme fatale, which is, I suppose it's not exactly a feminist trope, but it's a beautiful woman who will lure you like the sirens into a life of crime with her beauty and her nefarious aims, because she has decided that she wants to kill her husband. And because he's an insurance agent, he's like, well, if you kill him a certain way, you're not just going to make the insurance money, you'll make double with the so-called double indemnity clause, which seems a little wacky. If somebody dies on a moving train, you get double. I don't know. Is that really true? I've never bothered to look that up.
I don't know. I mean, insurance in itself is like gambling.
Of course it is.
Right? You're gambling on your life. And so why wouldn't they have a double whammy kind of prize for your
That's
insurance?
a good point.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But Jordan Hoffman, I wanted to just mention to you, you talked about the femme fatale character. And since you kind of teased us last episode to look for the Jewish themes, I thought of everything, this is probably the Jewish theme because it's biblical. I mean, think of Adam and Eve, straight from the Bible. We have Adam blaming his crime on his wife, Eve.
Right.
The woman you gave me, it's all her fault.
Exactly.
So I thought that was the Jewish theme.
I mean, that for sure is certainly an element there. Absolutely. So anyhow, yes. So it's Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray, but also, very importantly, you've got Edward G. Robinson as the sort of the closest thing to a moral center in this film, although really he's just someone who's very good at his job. He is the insurance claims adjuster who can sniff out a rat. And, the movie is, I've got the idea for the perfect crime. I know how to get the double indemnity clause. I know how to kill this person, make it look like an accident, but there is no perfect crime. And you will get caught. That is the idea. The fates will come for you eventually. And that's sort of the fatalism of the sort of the darkness that's permeating the whole film is the fatalism. Because in a way, and this is interesting, tell me if I'm wrong, you're kind of rooting for them. It's just the nature of movie making. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock talks about this all the time, and he loved Double Indemnity, by the way. He saw Double Indemnity in 1944 and took out a huge ad in Variety saying that this was the best American film of the last X amount of years and whatnot. But I mean, so many of his films, like you watch Dial M for Murder, and it's about a guy planning a murder, and you're like, like when it's not going right, like it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you're kind of like, come on. And then you go, what the hell am I doing? I'm rooting for this guy to murder this woman. What is that all about? In Double Indemnity, there's a great scene where the deed is done. The husband is killed, and now they have to get away, and the car won't start. And you're like, oh, come on. And then you think, what the hell's the matter with me? These people should go to jail. They just killed somebody. So it's a great complex series of emotions there if you're paying attention to yourself while you're watching the movie. That
let's hold right here for a second and go to a break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. Now, Jordan, you're talking about rooting for them or not. And I have to say that I really firmly did not like any of the characters in this film except for perhaps the daughter.
Yeah.
I had no sympathy for any of them.
Not even Edward G. Robinson?
Not even Edward G. Robinson, because hey, stop smoking already. That's enough. You know?
He's sort of
and indoors.
He's sort of allowed, but yeah, he does smoke cigars. There's a lot of smoking in these older movies. Well, I mean, yes, these are morally compromised characters, and you are eventually supposed to hate the woman when you learn more about her backstory, and you're supposed to feel bad for the main guy, but also recognize that he gets what's coming to him, and he knows it immediately.
See, I didn't feel bad for him at all, because, you know, from the beginning, I disliked him. He walks into this house and he's like sleazy with a married woman from the outside.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, I have no sympathy for you.
Well, I don't know if sympathy is the right word, but I mean, so you didn't, well, in that moment when when the car engine won't start, you do feel the tension of like, oh, they got to get out of there, right? I mean, you're in there. So part of you is, you just sort of are you're sympathetic for their plight in that moment.
No, it's like, oh, finally, they're going to get them. They should get caught right here. I'm not even kidding.
Okay.
I think I had my husband and I watched this film, and, you know, we always talk about how often did we fall asleep. And I have to say, we both fell asleep together at the same moment. So that always shows me that there's a real problem in the pacing.
What was the moment?
Right?
What was the moment?
And it was just before this whole murder scene was going through. We were just so kind of like,
oh no,
you know, about this.
Well, that's just because you watched
we
it
did
late.
not have sympathy for
okay.
them.
All right.
No,
Well,
we didn't watch it late.
Well, fair enough. I mean, that means that means that you have a higher ethical perch to stand on than I do, I suppose. But I do want to get into a little bit of the quote unquote what if any are the Jewish themes of this film. So number one.
Before you do that, though, actually, let's just talk about the main character for one little minute, because anyone like me who grew up on Nick at Night, I don't even know if this is still a thing in America,
might still
where
be,
you just see black and white reruns of all the programs that our parents grew up on, essentially. So Fred McMurray was the star. He was the father figure in My Three Sons. And so seeing him, you know, playing this 35-year-old sleazy insurance salesman.
It's always interesting. It's always interesting when you see somebody from an American sitcom that is like a kind of a very basic American sitcom, and then you see them in something else. It's like when you see Lucille Ball not playing Lucy, it's like, who the hell is this woman? It's shocking. That totally. is always a great move. And yes, he was in My Three Sons, and he's also in The Apartment too. He plays a not righteous man in that either.
I might see. But Barbara Stanwyck, okay, I kept looking at her, and I meant to Google her and find out what else she was in, because she just looks so familiar, but the hair was really bizarre in this, in Double Indemnity.
Barbara Stanwyck is in so many movies that I can't even think. The Lady Eve, which is a comedy with Henry Fonda. Ball of
I should just Google her, but her face is so beautiful. But we both thought that in the movie Double Indemnity, she looked trashy. Like, great.
I mean, she's a I don't want to say it. What is the word I'm looking for?
May she rest in peace. Okay.
In the film, she looks like the type of woman who is lazing around the house, perhaps drinking a few, praying that an insurance salesman should show up and maybe hit on her, kill her husband for sure, but also maybe just pay her some attention. She and her husband do not have the finest of marriages. She's eager to, although this is a film from 1944 and they fade to black, it is suggested that she and the main character engage in some intimate acts outside of the bonds of matrimony before they plan to kill someone. So yeah, she's a boozy woman lazing around in the middle of the day. Of course, she has a maid who like fetches her iced tea and stuff also, which I think is kind of funny. So anyhow, what if any are the Jewish themes of this film? And allow me to jump in here. Number one, I think what you'll find, and with a lot of the films that were made by other expats from Europe, including people like Otto Preminger, who we've talked about in the past, who was Jewish, Robert Siodmak, who also was Jewish, Jacques Turner, who was French, he was not Jewish, Fritz Lang was half Jewish, but he was not raised Jewish, but a lot of these guys were from that world that escaped the Nazis and came to America and started making these similar kind of cynical, jaded films that have an outsider's perspective on the American way of life. And I think the best example of that in Double Indemnity is, in fact, the image. When I mentioned before, if you Google film noir, you'll see an image. It's a shot of them scheming at a brand new American supermarket, which in 1944 was a new concept, that you could go into a brightly lit store with 10,000 cans of soup and beans. And it was very, the juxtaposition of planning a murder at this very homogenized, safe, family-friendly spot was a revolutionary scene, which is why that scene is so memorable. They go back to that. That's where they meet because they can't talk in public. They have to go to the supermarket. And it's sort of a jarring juxtaposition. And then she's wearing the dark sunglasses and that crazy wig. And, she looks so sultry. And then, of course, they keep getting interrupted. This old woman's like, can you hand me the baby formula up there, please? It's very funny. So that sort of, I think, has that sort of outsider's look at what American culture is, that comes from a place of at least being an immigrant and having a little bit of post-exile cynicism, as well as sort of a look at American occupation with greed, which is something that comes from perhaps from someone in exile. There also is a great distrust of people. The word double is in the title. Everybody has a double in this film. Our main character, Neff, he seems like an upstanding member of the business community, but actually he's ready to become a murderer. And he also is ready to pose. Part of the plan of how they kill the guy is that he pretends to be the guy so that he can fall. So it's sort of a plan. So there's a lot of like putting on faces, pretending to be something that you're not. If you want to read into it further, and I am not the first person to come up with this idea, if you want to look at this as an examination of how, what Hannah Arendt calls famously the banality of evil, how typical citizens. You got to remember, when Billy Wilder is making this, his family has been deported. He doesn't know what's going to happen to them, and deported from a society that he knew in Vienna, that was just his neighbors, suddenly became, part of the Nazi plan. So it's sort of how, you can read into that as, the two-faced society, and how, evil can lurk within, even with a smiling face. And that sort of plays in also to the crazy wig that Barbara Stanwyck is wearing. She seems just like a regular, suburban housewife, but she's wearing a costume and she's got these evil plans underneath. But then there is the key to the film, I think, so much so that he is the key, that the character's name is Keys. And this is the character played by Edward G. Robinson, whose birth name was Bernard Goldberg. And although the character is not Jewish per se, it is, I think you would call it, Jewish coded. He sort of is, he's a person of the book, literally. I mean, he's obsessed with books and papers and finding facts. And there's a scene where he has to quote, it's basically quoting from the Talmud when he's talking about rates of suicide. He's like, well, there's suicide by poison, there's suicide by this, there's suicide by drowning, and then subclause A and subclause B. And he goes on this, like, he's screaming it all out. And this to me is representative of, he is meant to be sort of a Jewish sage, although not about religion, about insurance claims, because that's what his job is, and that's what he's focused on.
Jordan Hoffman, slightly familiar to somebody who will quote how many times a certain tune is played during a Phish concert.
Perhaps that's
just saying.
Well, the band Phish does have a substantial Jewish fan base, and I think that you'll find that Emmanuel Goldberg, Edward G. Robinson's character, is meant to be Jewish coded in other ways too. In a comical way, he suffers from IBS. He's always got stomach problems, but that is what perpetuates the story. He's like, he's got a little man inside of him. It's his gut. It's his sechel, as they say in Yiddish. It's the he knows when something's not right, and it gives him indigestion, so much so that he's got to go down to the drugstore and take something because he's like, it's laying in me like cement. So this is kind of very funny if you're thinking about it from a Jewish perspective, but it drives the story of, like, he thinks he's going to get away with murder, but his friend, his mentor at the office, he's got a stomach ache, and that stomach ache won't go away until he finds his man. Also, he is, to a certain extent, a little bit of the court Jew in the context of The Office. Now, there is a great scene with the boss, And the boss is very gentile. He's got a big office, and he's a little bit of a dunce, a little bit. But
Did you say dunce or dick?
No, a little bit of a dunce. He's a little bit of a dunce because
I think he was
also a little bit of a dick. And he relies on Edward G. Robinson to get to the bottom of it. He sicks him out. He's like, this guy's always going to get his man. He's going to save the company some money. So he relies on him, but he doesn't respect him. Edward G. Robinson is
he's like, where's your jacket? Where's your tie?
It's the best scene. He comes in and he's working so hard for his boss, but he's doing it in his shirt sleeves because he's down in the muck. And when he comes in for the meeting, his boss gives him a snobby, where's your jacket? Like, so, you're never going to be part of our club. You're not respectable. You're a schlumpf, as they say, but I'm still going to use you for your brains. And that, I think, especially in 1944, would have resonated a lot with a Jewish audience. So,
but Jordan,
yes?
The movie is actually set in 1938.
That's true. Yeah,
which is super intentional because then you get to avoid all the hint of war. You don't have to refer to it at all. But, when you're talking about the banality of evil and all of these kind of themes, obviously they haven't been discussed yet in the world, even in 1944. And I think, the idea that regular people commit crimes is, a tale as old as time.
For sure. But I think also it speaks to what Wilder was thinking. If you said it in 1938 and there's this sense of foreboding doom, like he there's the thing in the voiceover says as soon as the thing happens and it looks like they got away with it, he says I couldn't feel the ground underneath my feet. I knew in that moment that I was cursed, and he can't escape the fate no matter what. And I think maybe that's part of it also, like setting the film in 1938, knowing this trouble is coming over in Europe, and it needs to be faced and addressed no matter what. I think how intentional that was at the time, we'll never know, but it certainly feels that way now. So, I should also say there's also a lot of comedy in this movie, right? I mean, there are some funny moments. It's dark and cynical, but really juicy, and the writing is really clever, and the way it all wraps up is just it's a classic for a reason. It's one of these great movies, and should you ever, if you're listening and say, oh yeah, the film noir, you always hear that expression, what's the one I should go to? This is the first one. This is the first stop on the train, I think. And then there are many, many more after that, but this is the one where you get it all.
So Jordan, I think pretty clearly your ranking would be...
Oh, not bad. I give it a full not bad. I really, and watching it again, I hadn't seen it in many years. I was just like, oh yeah, this is the stuff. This is like, when you get it, it's summertime right now. When you get a really good peach, you're like, oh yeah, this is why I eat 14 okay peaches, because I'm going to get a really good one of these days.
I had the best melon in the world last night. So good that I woke up my husband and I was like, you have to eat this melon because I'm going to finish it out. It is so good.
That does happen sometimes.
So yes, I know. Yeah. Yes. So this movie to me was not that melon. And I would say it was probably on the level of meh. It was really meh for me, not even meh plus, which I like to give. I would say it was definitely meh because, as I said, I just did not find the characters at all sympathetic. We fell asleep at a certain point, even though it wasn't that late, and we watched it on the television and not on the computer. All the signs were there that we could stay up, but we didn't. So I'm giving it a meh.
Well, I mean, the listeners may scold you because we did get a lot of emails from people that were very excited that we were going to talk about Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
And a lot of recommendations. Some people wanted us to talk about Ace in the Hole or The Apartment or this.
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yep.
Sunset Boulevard is also, I would call that a film noir. It's in the same... It has a lot of similarities, and it's really good. I don't know which is better, Sunset Boulevard or Double Indemnity. There is no answer. They're both tied. They're both perfect in their own way. But yeah.
And I have to just say that we loved getting all of the emails. It is definitely a highlight of my week, of my life, of my universe to get these emails from you guys.
So let me ask you, how did you accidentally rent the apartment because you pushed the wrong button and next thing you know you paid for
I am a very frustrating person when it comes to technology. And for really weeks, I've been trying to figure out why I have not been able to rent films on Amazon. And then I clicked a certain button in the back end of my account. And then I tried again to rent a film on Amazon, just kind of randomly because somebody had just suggested the apartment. And I was like, well, I'm met on Double Indemnity. Maybe we should watch another one. But then I had a nice yoga class instead of watching it. In any case, I pushed the button and it actually works. So now I can rent films on Amazon.
Well, that's the good news, is that you now know how to rent movies on Amazon, and they're not too expensive. $4 American dollars, $5 American dollars, depending on which one.
Yeah.
So do you want to do The Apartment for next week? Because my argument for doing it is as follows. One, you've already paid for it. Two,
true.
Billy Wilder, although you were met on Double Indemnity, is a very important Jewish figure in Hollywood and in culture. I told you the whole Steven Spielberg story. And I also said that he kind of has two lanes of films. One are the dark crime stories, and one are the more lighthearted comedies. And The Apartment fits into the other category. So you're kind of getting, it's like a black and white cookie. You're getting the chocolate and the vanilla if we were to do Double Indemnity and The Apartment.
You know what?
Yeah?
Jordan, if I come to New York, that's what you have to get me, because I've never had one.
You've never?
A black and white cookie.
Well, now I'm going to say something shocking. The black and white cookies are great because they remind American Jews of their grandparents, and they're fantastic. But the truth of the matter is they're not that great. Like, there's a limit. There's a ceiling to them. They're basically leftover food. I mean, we've discussed, in fact, if you go deep into the archives of Times of Israel, I interviewed a character, I forget his name, Ziggy somebody or other, from the film Deli Man, which is a great movie about American Jewish Ashkenazi food. And he talks about the black and white cookie. It's like, it was originally called dump cake. It was the leftover batter. You slapped it on the thing, and then you put a little glaze of icing on it. Boop, 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 it's done. So the black and white cookie are great because they look gorgeous, and grandma gave them to you. But I find that it's sort of when it's never my first choice, but if you've never had one, you really must. They really are quite delicious. I mean, they're a great snack.
Okay. Well, it'll be after Thanksgiving, so probably it'll be leftover at Thanksgiving with a glaze. There we go.
Exactly.
It's perfect.
So what do you say?
Okay, moving on.
Rather
So
than we don't have anything else planned, and the readers did want us to. Many readers wanted us to watch The Apartment.
That's true. There was a lot of public outcry for it. All right. So let's say tentatively we're penciling in The Apartment, unless we come up with something else. And I think there are a couple of things on the Netflix. There's stuff coming up with the Sandler family again, which could be fun
they're back.
To watch.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I will be in touch.
Okay.
But tentatively speaking, all right.
Okay. Good.
Why not? The Apartment. I did pay for it.
That's right. It's already paid for.
It hurts.
Sometimes it's fun to watch these sort of older classics and instead of the newer films that I don't know. I really like older movies sometimes. I mean, obviously they're stylized. Nobody talks like that. But
true.
And maybe some of the Billy Wilder was never known. He was known for so many things, but being a visual stylist, he was pretty straightforward with his filmmaking. I mean, he never got fancy with the camera, as he would say it. But enough so.
You know what could be fun, Jordan, is we found also a documentary about Billy Wilder, and there has to be one, right?
Oh, for sure.
So that could be kind of fun too.
Well,
so
I would actually invite
give that to you as my challenge.
I would invite readers and yourself, because you edited this. I began this conversation talking about Wilder's career in Vienna and Berlin, and everybody that knows his story knew that he was a newspaper writer, and he talks about that taxi dancing story in that book I mentioned with Cameron Crowe. So it was a bit of a thing of lore, but until very recently, unless you spoke German, you could never read these stories, but they were translated into a book. I think it's called Billy Wilder on Assignment, Dispatches from Vienna and Berlin, blah, 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 blah. And the book is fantastic. And I interviewed the editor of the book, a fellow by the name of Noah Eisenberg. And if you go to Google and type in Times of Israel, Billy Wilder, Jordan Hoffman, because I wrote the article, you will see the article which I wrote and that you edited 5 years ago, 6 years ago, not that long ago.
Such a good memory.
Yeah.
Such a
I
good
would
memory.
say, what is this now, 2026? I would say that this was done in 2022, give or take. And You'll hear a lot of stories about it from the editor of this book, and also how the book came to be. And it's a great book. It's a short read. Yet, like I mentioned, the newspaper he wrote for was called Tempo. It was a type of newspaper you read on the streetcar. Short articles, pithy, to the point, boom, 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 boom. And his writing style in these articles are great. And sometimes they're like topics like I could not care about. Like it was about, interviews with celebrities he did a lot of, and then the sort of like slice of life, like he would talk to a guy who shines shoes outside the train station in Vienna. But then some of them are about like news of the day and not things that have reverberated through history. Just like, he went to the city council that day and it talked about what was happening with whatever. Nothing too sexy, but it has his style. So it's a really interesting book.
Very cool. Thank you for that reminder. Of course, I remembered you writing that article 5 or 6 years ago and re-editing it, obviously. All right, Jordan Hoffman.
Yes.
Always a pleasure. And I look forward to speaking about the apartment with you, plus, whatever, surprise, question mark.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll get you next time.
Definitely. Thank you for listening to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze. Please check out another installment next week. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any questions or comments, suggestions, helpful tips, maybe even recipes, let's just hand it out there. Please write us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, shalom.